guys, this is Brandy with another tutorial, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you guys how to add texture to your images. So let's not waste any more time and let's get started. So the first thing you want to do is you want to open your image. You can do that by selecting your file folder, locating your image, and dragging and dropping it over. You can also go to File, Open, and then you can select the image that you want. Select Open, and then it'll open from there. So after your image is open, you want to open up your textures. I got mine from a free website. I can't exactly remember the name, but I'll link it down below. But you want to open your folder where your textures are, and you want to click and drag the texture that you want. So I'm going to go with this one right here. So I'm going to click and drag it on top of my image. And now I'm going to stretch it over. So to stretch it, you just click on these little square things you see here, and then you start to stretch. Just make sure that the whole image is covered. Select the check mark once you're done. Okay, so there are two different ways that I blend the texture with my background. The first thing I do, the first way, is to put your image into a folder, and then I'm going to change the folder's blending mode to multiply. So already it's kind of blended into the background, but it's not all that yet. So we want to add a layer mask to this image folder, so I'm going to do that. Select B on your keyboard for your brush tool and make sure that you have a black brush selected. My opacity is at 100 and I do have a soft brush selected. My hardness is at 0%. I'm just going to start brushing this off of my subject. So you want to just brush it off of whatever you don't want the texture to be on. I'm just going to do that. Alright, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the opacity of the entire folder. So I'm just going to lower it down some. And about right there looks good to me. So something special that I do to make it blend even more and to give the image, I always like to use this word, but to give my image a little bit more depth and have my subject to stand out is to add a blur to the layer. So make sure that your texture is selected. And you're going to go to Filter, Blur, and select Gaussian Blur. So that has already changed it like a ton. So this is my blur at 0.1. And just gradually take it up until, you know, you're satisfied. I like to make it seem like that the background is kind of like a wall. And so the focus is on my subject. So I want that wall to be nice and blurred, but not too blurred to where the texture, you know, disappears entirely, which you can see here. It's not showing here because my computer is going super slow. There we go. You don't want it to, you know, disappear entirely. So I'm going to stick to about, let's see what 7.4 gives me. Let's go up to about 8. I'm going to stick with 9. Okay, and to see the before and after with the blur effect, you're going to go right here where it says Smart Filter and turn it off. So that's before, and then that's after. So that makes a huge difference. You still have your texture, but you know, it gives your image a little bit more depth. So this is the first way that I do this technique, and now I'm going to show you guys the second way. Okay, so the second way to do this is I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab my textures. Instead of one texture, I'm going to use 2. So I'm really liking this one right here. I actually use it in a lot of my images. And I'm going to use this one right here. So what you do is click Control and then select them. Click and drag. Now I'm just going to stretch it on out. same thing. Okay, again, I'm going to compile these textures into their own folder. And now I'm going to add a layer mask to the folder. So I'm going to lower the opacity of the entire folder to close to 50%. And now I'm going to select B on my keyboard for my brush tool. And of course, I have a soft brush at an opacity of 100 selected. And now I'm just going to brush it off of the subject again. Okay, so now I'm going to take my opacity all the way up. I'm going to click right here on the arrow to open my folder, and I'm going to work with the first texture. So I'm going to go on and lower the opacity of this texture to about, I'll say 20%. And I'm going to do the same thing with the bottom texture, 20%. I'm going to go back to the top texture, and now I'm going to click Control-Alt-L, and that'll bring up my levels panel. And now what I want to do is I want to kind of start to blend this in. So you can't exactly see the first texture that well because the lower texture has a pretty high opacity too. But I'm just going to start dragging over. So this slider right here will brighten it, and that's not what I want. And I actually want it to be darkened. So I'm going to drag the one on the far left side over, and that darkens it quite a bit. I'm going to play with this middle slider to darken, and then this slider on the far right I'm going to bring in. And remember that you guys aren't going to have the same settings as me when it comes to, comes to the levels. You just have to play around with it and, go from there. So I'm going to select OK, and now I'm going to do the same thing to this bottom texture. I'm going to click Control-Alt-L on my keyboard, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to darken it a tad. I'm going to play with the output levels. That's actually my favorite one to play with. Bring this, darken that a little bit, just slightly. Select OK. And now I'm going to add my blur. I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I'm going to lower it down to about 9.0. Select OK. I'm going to do the same thing once it loads. I'm going to do the same thing with the top layer. Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. Select OK. Okay, so now I'm going to lower the opacity of the whole folder. So just select your folder and start lowering down the opacity. And that looks fantastic. I do have it in her hair a little bit, so I'm just going to brush that off. And that's all there is to it. So, of course, don't forget to right-click your background layer and flatten the image. Okay guys, so that's all that I have for now. Let me know down in the comments section which technique that you liked the best. I'm very curious to know. So yeah, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, please comment down below. And if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe. Thanks guys. Bye.